I'm a fan of yours. I don't know if that's going to do much for you when it comes to election stuff. But so I'm going to play something for you. This is May 2023. Okay. What I like about you is you are a data-driven. I know we've had other people say they're data-driven. But you're like, just show me the results. So we're going to give you X amount of dollars. Show us that the money's being well spent, right? Isn't that generally the idea?
That's what you're supposed to do.
Why is that so odd? Why is that so odd?
No, I mean we have to make sure that we're spending money wisely.
Right.
Anyway, so I have to always ask those questions.
Sure. So here's an example of it. So this is so these people came in, they're talking about harm reduction. They were giving out, they said, well, people aren't injecting drugs anymore. That's good. So what are they doing? Well, they're smoking them. So what are you guys going to do? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to give them pipes, like good pipes that they can smoke the drugs with. That's the idea.
Well, I think that you would have to really pay attention to that whole segment of, but they were talking about the ways in which they keep people who are using drugs safe while they're using drugs.
So here's a cut from that.
What is the harm that's...
This is you, by the way. This is you wanting to basically know what's the harm reduction. And we'll talk right after this about why this is such a personal story for you. Hang on, watch.
Being reduced by the distribution of supplies that simply help people to use drugs. And how do you measure the effectiveness of that public investment?
Yeah, sure. With the increase in fentanyl use, one of the things that we know is that people are not injecting drugs like they used to. Most of the fentanyl that is coming in now is in the form of pills or in the form of powders that people can either smoke, ingest, snort. They don't need a needle to use. And so what happens is if we cannot bring them in for services, then they're much more vulnerable to overdose, all the negative impacts. And so one of the pieces of evidence that's really clearly emerging is that by handing out smoking supplies for people, it brings them in for service. It brings them in to get access to naloxone. It brings them in to get access to buprenorphine. It brings them in for access to a case manager. It brings them in to identify if they have fentanyl in their drugs, all that type of stuff. So
at this point, I watched this. I thought, I know what she's going to ask. Hold on.
Passing out smoking supplies has really proven an effective tool for engaging people in other types of services.
Okay, so this was 2023. And I knew you were going to ask this. And this is makes perfect sense. You're like, okay, the guy said there's evidence, right? We're getting funding. We're giving people pipes. They're coming in. But the big question is, they're not. I guess the question is, how are you helping them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, the big question is why?
What do you mean by that?
Why are we investing in this, service?
Service. Okay, so here's your question.
So you would track the number of people that
you're looking for. You give me some data. Give me some metrics here.
Receive smoking supplies and go into treatment, and so that would be a measurement of success of that investment. Do you have those numbers?
There's been info briefs about the number of people who have been given smoking supplies, and
he basically doesn't have an answer. You're like, okay, I'm giving the money. Then how are you helping them? Do you have the data to show that if they come in for help, they're actually getting help? Right.
Right.
Yeah. And then I'll just play this last little part, which is the most amazing thing. This made all the news. I think it made national news as well. A member from the Hepatitis Education Project, which, by the way, the 2023, I pulled up their tax returns. So they get about $2.5 million, executive compensation, $206,000, other salaries, $1.2 million. The assets, they run through all their stuff. So you can look at their tax returns. So this is the Hepatitis Education Project, and this is their basic philosophy, which I think goes completely against the grain of, I'm sure, you and most people when you hear.
I don't have information in front of me that talks about, and maybe let me stop. And my friends are closer to the work than I am. I mean, is there anything you want to add or?
I'll just say, I know it can be a little controversial, one of the key tenets of harm reduction that I see is that we want to be able to facilitate and champion autonomy of people who use drugs. And so there are folks who don't want to stop using drugs. There are folks for whom abstinence is not something by which they measure their success in life. Our friends at People's Harm Reduction Alliance invented a whole new pipe so that people could smoke and not inject.
What were you thinking when you were sitting there and you heard that?
I was thinking we should try to get people not to want to smoke. Frankly, that is, to me, that is the harm that we need to reduce, is the damage of addiction.
Right.
And so I was wondering, some people would think that we're just making it more convenient by providing the supplies, but
yeah. So you want to go, as I like to say, upstream. We want to go up there. Why does the person feel the need to do the drug? It's not about, hey, we'll give you something so you can do the drug. It's solve the problem up. So this is the story that was in the paper, and it doesn't get as much coverage, is the fact that you're saying, listen, why don't we go and rather than spending money somewhere else on this sort of stuff, why not get in there and actually get the person who's got the addiction and get them really, really good treatment?
Well, it depends on what you call really good treatment. Now, I had no idea when I got into office in 2022, and I thought, why aren't we helping people get into rehab?
Yes.
Where I went, or whatever. And it turns out there are a lot of politics to substance use disorder policy response.
Okay.
And so I'll just say that there are different camps in the ways that people think about what we should be doing as a government. I fall squarely in the camp that if someone is cycling through chronic homelessness, several overdoses, etc., they have got a problem. They might not be and we have got to help get them into treatment sooner rather than later, because if not, then they can change their mind, and that is a path that they can take to repair their lives. It doesn't have to be abstinence-only treatment. It has to be something fairly profound.
Because what happens now? I mean, other than this woman advocating for autonomy and handing out pipes.
Well, I think the city government should not be helping people ingest drugs.
Okay.
I understand the needle exchange. That was harm reduction because we were reducing the harm of spreading hepatitis and HIV.
Yeah.
To my mind, as you heard me say, what is the harm that's being reduced? I can't see it. They are saying that we're using this as a tool to generate trust amongst people, living on the street, and maybe they'll go into treatment. That does not cut it, because what they are ingesting is so deadly, so cheap, and so ubiquitous.
Right.
Helping ingestion by passing out supplies, to me, seems complicit in someone's demise.
Right. So it would be like if I had a revolver and I stuck one round in and spun the thing, right? And held it up to my head. Well, there's what are the chances of it spinning and opening in that chamber and I kill myself? I'm just spinning the Russian roulette with these drugs. So let's take away the whole ridiculousness of giving somebody a pipe. So how much money do you think the city needs to spend to get people into real treatment? Because from personal experience, at a certain point in your life, you realize, I got a problem with alcohol.
Yes. It was 2020. I'm an extrovert, unsupervised at home whose family owns a brewery, and I saw the direction that my drinking was going. My dad was an alcoholic. He'd tried quitting many, many times, and it wasn't until he did inpatient treatment that he was able to basically spend the last 20 years of his life sober. Okay, so I figured, I've got some time on my hands. Why not just go for the method that has the best chance of success? And so I checked myself in. I decided in the afternoon, and I was there that night. And so this whole thing that we're talking about today, that was in the paper, this pilot program that I started, is motivated by the notion that everybody deserves the same chance at recovery that I had. Period.
You should be Sara Nelson should not be the exception to the rule. But the problem, of course, is always money, right?
Right.
So because it's not cheap where you went.
No, but it depends on relative to what. No, it's about I would say at that point it was around $11,000 for a month. But here's the thing. The barriers are time and money. Because if you don't have money, your own insurance, you're either going to pay out of your pocket or insurance. And yeah, there are empty beds all over the city. If you don't have that and you only have Medicaid, for example, now you're going to be on a waiting list. And that's where the time kicks in. And while you're waiting for a bed to open up someplace, you could be dead. You could overdose in that interval. So we have to provide access when people are ready to take that step right then.
I think what you have to look at is the total amount of money that the city spends on the entire thing, the whole problem. And you have to get rid of this kind of garbage programs that give out this or that. And you have to stop this money that is just simply, we'll just give you no barrier to homeless. We'll put you somewhere in some place so that you can do drugs in some house somewhere that we're paying $350,000 for that particular room. There's a set amount of money, and the money needs to be used as effectively as possible so that the outcome is that person is no longer high. So that person is no longer addicted, right? That's the end result of every dollar spent. $11,000 a month is not that much. I mean, you consider what we're spending to have the police, the courts, the systems, the crime, the insurance. Every single one of us pays for that addicted individual that's on that street.
Well, that is the case that addiction ends up generating a lot of expenses for the body politic, let's just say. But I do want to nuance something that you said. It doesn't have to be that you end up so that person never gets high again. I do ascribe to the notion that recovery is a broad category, and it means different things to different people. Insert my politician speak right now. Okay, so I want to say this. Methadone and buprenorphine are used for opioid use disorder, so that people don't score on the street, and and it stabilizes an addiction, and it allows them to live. Some people,
I get it,
a completely normal life, go to job, have relationships, etc. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But we have to provide other options. And I put this forward in 2022. It didn't get funded. I tried again the following year. When we had Seattle and the county were not funding recovery-based treatment like we just described, where you check yourself into rehab and you stay there for a month and you're actually trying to get sober, and then you come out and then you try to maintain it or whatever. We were not offering that. We weren't funding that. And I thought that was too narrow of a scope of options that the city was funding, and so that's why I put this forward.
So how much money did you ask for?
The first year I thought $2 million ought to do it. That could get a lot of people on a path to recovery. That year, that was in 2022. During the budget deliberations, I dropped the number to $1 million. That didn't fly. It did not get any votes. I was able to get a little, statement of legislative intent that this should be studied, et cetera, and it was. And then the following year, I started at $1 million, and eventually it got whittled down to $300,000. But I'll take it because you know what? Here's the thing.
Yeah.
We have got to show that this model works.
Sure.
And here's what's unique about this model. One of our care department employees, with the non-uniform response. Mm-hmm. Or a homelessness outreach person, or We Heart Seattle. Anybody who has direct contact with people who are suffering on our streets can, if they see a good candidate and is willing to do it, they can refer that person to this treatment facility, and they get in, and then the city just gets the bill, and then we pay the bill. And it cuts out a lot of time and hassle to get someone into beds that are open.
Yes.
It's not true that, they're all full. They're all full of, the Medicaid beds are full because there are fewer of those, but it is possible to get somebody into treatment when they're ready to go. And so let's make that happen. Is
the city funding for particular types of drug and alcohol rehabilitation that is ineffective?
I'm not going to take that bite. I would say, we are still funding. We're still funding the distribution of consumption supplies beyond needles, and I do not think that is we shouldn't be doing that. I tried to take money away from that in this past budget, but that didn't work. The point is that we have to provide a wide range of options because there's a wide range of addictions. And one thing about my model, where you just you go into treatment, you get detox for about 5 days, and then you stay there for about a month. It's agnostic, whatever drug you're hooked on. right?
Yeah.
So it's not just opioid use disorder, it's meth disorder, it's everything, it's alcohol, etc.
How much, this is, do I have time for this last one? Ready? In 1 minute. How much of your particular point of view, which runs up against some of those others that are in the council, do you feel ever that you don't get as far as you can because you're not quite on the same team with some of the others?
I feel like this council is not arrayed against me, and the public. When I say, you know what, the city of Seattle doesn't fund rehab, they all think that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I believe that this is what is considered a good response.
Yeah.
But again, there was the certain drug reformers, over the past couple decades have really created a reality that I don't believe in.
All right, let's just let's hit a couple quick things. And the reason you're here is because you have said to the city, listen, the programs we have when it comes to helping people that have drug addictions, it's just not working. We don't have the metrics to show, and we spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, not only on the homeless, but then on the drugs, because it's all combined, right?
I'm not saying they're not working.
Okay.
Some of them. I mean, some of the harm reduction, the buprenorphine and the methadone,
right,
that is helping people not be out there scoring really bad drug and dying right away.
Okay.
Some of the, but I do oppose some of the things that we are funding.
Okay.
And we have to have a number of different interventions. But I think that with fentanyl, as I've said before, helping people get well or on a path to recovery reduces their chances of overdosing someday. So
you asked for $2 million. They said no. Then you went to $1 million. Then they said, okay, here you go, Sara Nelson. Here's $300. What did they give you? $350,000?
Yes.
And you said, okay, I'm going to take that $350 and I'm going to create a program. $300,000. Sorry. I'm going to take my $300,000. I'm going to put it into this program, and I'm going to track it and see if it's working. Because then at that point they go, oh, look at this. What Sara Nelson came up with her $300,000, it was a quote-unquote success, okay? That's what we're looking for. So what's the program, and how do you measure the success?
Sure. Well, I don't measure. Just kidding. Just kidding. Do I have to do that? Just kidding. So here's the thing. It's a pot of money that's sitting in some account at the Human Services Department. Okay. And when a caseworker or when somebody goes to treatment and finishes it, they might leave early, but when we get the bill from the treatment center, and it could be up to 5, my legislation said, 1 to 5 treatment centers, it doesn't really matter where people go, it has to be convenient. And then when they're done, the center bills us, and then we pay the money. And what we're tracking is, how many people went through the full course of treatment? How many people are going to be involved in some outpatient care afterwards? How many people got into sober housing and are starting to put their lives back together, connect with family, get a job, etc. So those are some of the things that we are going to, that's what I think success looks like, getting your life together. That is recovery. However, that's very subjective. So at first we're just going to be looking at how many people did we serve and what aftercare services did they want, so that we can think about how much more money it would, if we re-up our dwindling $300,000 account, what might it look like to take it to a bigger scale? Where's the tough love? There's people probably listening going, okay, great. They should get that guy that's doing drugs, that's stealing, breaking into people's cars, grab that guy, throw him in jail. Well, that is if people don't want to, if people are engaged in criminal activity because they're feeding an addiction and then they're busted and then they are offered to go to treatment and then they say, no, thank you. Well, then the other option is, I'm supposed to say diversion services, but basically it could be a period of time in jail where they can detox and then get out and hopefully be hooked up with somebody who can take them directly to some other sober living facility or longer-term treatment or whatever. If you look at it, they declare the what? Let's go ahead. But one of the things I want to say, because you mentioned jobs. A piece that's missing in our homelessness response and also in how we work with people with substance use disorder addicts is that the last thing you want to do is put somebody who's come through a treatment program or maybe is getting out of jail, plunk them in a permanent supportive housing or some other kind of living situation with nothing else to do. Then they're going to be bored. that, I was bored during 2020, and I saw my drinking pick up in response to that a little bit too. So we have to provide other things. We always say we have to provide housing and services. That's, well, what services? And so I think that we're a little bit weak on that side, but I do believe that some of the services we should be providing is making sure that people have the ability to fill out a job application, and that we are helping people get interviews or, job placement. Uplift Northwest does a great job of that.
Yeah.
That's a nonprofit. So we have to be doing other things to help people get their lives back together so they break this cycle.
I heard an interview, this is a number of years ago, the Doe Fund in New York City. So they start people, break them out of it, get them a job, they're picking up garbage. Then they work from there into other parts of the job programs that they have. And it was somebody from NPR was interviewing this guy, and they asked to see, I hear that you still have your first pay stub. He says, yeah, I have that in my wallet. That doesn't mean that much to me, but I don't hardly ever pull it out and look at it anymore. He goes, that doesn't mean anything compared to this. And he had a picture. This is when people used to have pagers. He had a photo of the pager and the message that had come through the pager. And he says, this is more valuable than that paycheck. And it said, Scott, we need you in here tomorrow.
Wow. Yeah.
He said, first time in my life anyone ever needed me to be somewhere.
Exactly. And
And do you understand that? The idea that your paycheck is, you spent that. But he still had a photo of that thing.
Yeah, people need to feel that they have value and that value is recognized in other people. And how do you do that? Then you provide something of value, and we should be able, and that is a part of building one's personal dignity back, right?
Yes.
And that is key to it. That's part of one's recovery, getting one's life back together.
All right, you ready for a tough question?
No.
Okay.
Just kidding.
We got a Nate early. I got a theory. We attract people from other parts of the country.
That's not a theory.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Well, look out, because I've heard people say that's not true. Here's what I've heard. Oh, Amazon came in and created so many jobs that the price of houses went up and then everybody was homeless, or so many people are homeless. That's absolute garbage. I was out on the streets one day with my buddy, Sergeant Hockett. We met a guy, still had a needle in his arm. He's 24 years old. And Dave said, what's your story? He said, I had my wisdom teeth taken out 3 years ago. I was living in Boise. I got hooked on Oxy. It was too expensive for Oxy, so there were other drugs, but I couldn't find them. And a friend said, you should go to Seattle. Why? Because the drugs are really cheap and no one's going to bother you. And then he went to Seattle. So he was 25 years old, homeless in Seattle, who just 3 years ago had his wisdom teeth taken out. And here he is enjoying a horrible life, completely and absolutely supported by Seattle.
Right. And so I've heard lots of stories like that before, too. Now, whether or not addiction causes homelessness or homelessness causes addiction, it doesn't really matter to me. If we are not... if we are allowing people to live on the sidewalk as beacons for drug dealers to come in and take advantage of the people that are living on the sidewalk and et cetera, we have now created a marketplace. And that is what we have to interrupt. We have to remove the marketplace, remove the opportunity, and deal with that. The city of Seattle is complicit if they do not remove encampments, because that is where bad stuff goes down, not just, drug dealing, consumption, manufacture, but sex trafficking, etc. And people are getting shot. Vulnerable people are getting preyed upon there. And so we have a responsibility. This whole Stop the Sweeps thing, I beg to differ, because not stopping the sweep is an inhumane way to create more victims.
Look at Joe, huh? Sarah Nelson. By the way, I have to say this real quick. We got the break. The city council that was there, say, 4 or 5 years ago, this is a different city council. Your voice is heard. Your voice is respected. You've got Bob in there as well. You've got some good people in there. And I think the slow direction, the redirection of the city, the saving of Seattle, hopefully is right out there in the future. Sarah Nelson, thanks so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're
Invite
welcome.
me back.
Okay, we will. Look at that. You're inviting yourself back.